In the next 23 minutes, I'm going to prove that every problem in your life and every crisis in the world comes from just one thing. And once you see this, you'll understand how to dissolve problems instantly so you can bend reality rather than being broken by it. Every problem, both in your life and that you see out there in the world, is a result of one thing and one thing only. And in this episode, we're going to unpack that. Any friction that we are experiencing in our health, in our wealth, in our relationships, in our spiritual growth is actually an old program that needs to be uninstalled and replaced. Similarly, all of the challenges that we see in the world, from war to political divide to inflation to Brexit to whatever you want to point your finger at, is a result of one thing, and that is belief systems held in the nervous system of human beings. That's right. We create our own reality, individually and collectively. And what is showing up in our life and in our world that we do not like is an indication of one thing and one thing only, which is unmetabolized trauma. Early age programs passed on generation to generation, ancestral and generational trauma that has not been properly processed. And this is why people refer to this time as a great awakening, because when you realize this, you can actually control your reality. You can alter what the great mystic Neville Goddard referred to as the 5-sense screen of space, the movie screen of your life, and change not only your life for the better, but you can actually better the world. And this is what Gandhi meant when he said, be the change you want to see in the world. This is not some sort of new age woo-woo. There's actually nothing mystical about it. It's an understanding of how both behavioral psychology and consciousness theory function. And it is the single most important thing you must understand if you want to be free. So let's get into it. We're going to start with this idea of creating your own reality. How do thoughts become things? Now, I've talked about this in other episodes, but not in this context. You do create your own reality. There was a little book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Napoleon went out. He was commissioned by Andrew Carnegie to interview the 13 most successful, hundreds actually, of the most successful and powerful people at that time. He came up with 13 principles that he identified that the most successful people were implementing in their life. But central to these 13 things was the idea that you're creating your own reality. And there have been a lot of things since then, right? The movie The Secret, I think, came out around 2001, Rhonda Byrne's. There have been great teachers that teach that you create your own reality, from, as I mentioned before, Neville Goddard to Florence Scovel Shinn to Raymond Charles Barker. Modern teachers like Wayne Dyer, Marianne Williamson, and you could throw a stone, and if you're watching a lot of videos on YouTube, find a video about how you create your own reality. But how does this actually work? How do thoughts create our reality? And the answer is there's an internal mechanism and an external mechanism. The internal mechanism is explained by behavioral psychology. What behavioral psychology tells us is that what you believe, meaning the conclusions that you came to at a very early age about how reality works, conclusions like money is hard to make, or money is scarce, or you can't trust people, or there's not enough time, or I'm not good enough, or children should be seen and not heard. Those became rules that started to structure your perception of reality. And unless you become aware of them and change your internal rule set, unless you start working on your limiting beliefs, you carry those forward. And what you believed then is how you think now. In other words, if you believe that money is scarce, you're going to have thoughts of financial insecurity. So if you're somebody who's thinking a lot about not having enough money, those thoughts are a byproduct of a core belief that was formed at a very early age that you don't remember, probably passed down from your parents, who also didn't really understand any of this and believed that money was scarce or money was hard to make. And so it was a learned psychological behavior or habit. So your beliefs determine what you think, and your thoughts, every time you have one, you experience as emotions. So just notice, like, if you have a good feeling thought, it produces emotions like joy or curiosity or calm or peace. If you have a bad feeling thought, it creates emotions like stress or anxiety or overwhelm. Every time you have a thought, there's this electrical activation in your brain, this activation of what are called neural networks. That's a thought. And then that electrical activity is translated through the rest of your nervous system, and you experience the thought as an emotion. Beliefs create thoughts, thoughts create emotions. Emotions determine action. So depending on how you feel, that's what you do. You feel stressed, you'll do stressed behaviors. You feel excited, you'll take excited action. And ultimately, those actions over time produce the results. Beliefs produce thoughts, produce emotions, generate actions, produce results. And the results, once you produce them, you'll observe the result and you'll come to the same conclusion, or you'll experience the belief that started it in the first place. See, I can't trust people. See, I knew things don't work out for me. See, I know wealth is for other people, but it's not for me. So this is called a psychocybernetic loop. And this is why sometimes life feels like a Groundhog Day. What you believe becomes your reality, and it just reinforces the belief. That's the internal mechanism of how a thought becomes a thing through the action of you. Now, there's an external mechanism, and this is what's spoken about in metaphysics or consciousness theory or quantum theory, and that is you are an electrical magnetic being, and so as you're having these thoughts and having these emotions, you're actually creating a frequency or a resonance. We can see it in your brain. We can find it in your nervous system. We can measure it in your heart. And so you're broadcasting at an invisible level these thoughts and these belief systems, and life is organizing the cooperative components to create coincidences and synchronicities that prove your hypothesis out. In other words, if you believe something to be true, life will actually align to make that truth a reality and prove it to you in your experience. So this is how thought becomes things. And the challenge is when some of these thoughts or these beliefs are trauma-driven or fear-driven. When they come out of these early misunderstandings, either things that happened to us or things that were passed on to us, what we would call trauma. Trauma doesn't have to be a big T trauma, like you were sexually abused or physically abused. It could be a small T trauma, like I don't matter. But trauma, if we're going to call it that, is what creates the problems. Because of the way that you create your own reality, if you've got trauma that's never been resolved, it's going to create friction in your life at an individual level. And if you've got a lot of people that you put together who have similar trauma that hasn't been metabolized or digested or processed properly, they're going to create things that they don't want at scale in the world. And so some examples of trauma or limiting belief systems, I mentioned them before. Money is scarce, right? I can't trust people. Nobody listens to me. I might not have enough, or I'm not enough. And so these things start to transform into real world experiences in your life and collectively. So for example, like I'm not worthy of being heard transforms itself into censorship. Or I might not have enough, or money is scarce, materializes systems of financial control and systems of inflation. And I'm not enough starts to manifest itself as division or a mechanism to justify self-worth, like war. We're right, they're wrong. We have to prove them wrong by beating them so that we can be right, so we can justify our own self-worth and our own self-esteem. And so this is how trauma starts to create friction in the system, both at an individual level as you're creating your own reality and a collective level as we're creating the world together. What's really interesting about how this works is that trauma held in your nervous system is like holding a vibration or a program in your nervous system. And when you hold that program in your nervous system, it starts to activate information in the field. So again, Neville Goddard talks about how there's actually two realities that are occurring simultaneously. He describes it as a third dimension and a fourth dimensional reality. And the third dimension is the reality that we experience, called our life, right? Past, present, future, what we experience with our five senses. It's a very material reality. And he also describes a fourth dimensional reality, which is more like a field. And people who talk about the field of consciousness or the quantum field are all talking about similar things. And what Goddard says is in this fourth dimensional space, which is sort of this field of information, that's where all ideas live. That's where everything that has ever materialized in the third dimension actually originates from. So an example I would use is that, Edison didn't discover the light bulb. Now, I know a lot of you don't actually believe Edison discovered the light bulb. Anyway, I've made this comment on other videos and everybody wants to give me their own theories. Don't miss the point. Edison didn't actually discover the light bulb. He tuned in to the information of the light bulb that existed in the field. And so, for example, I have a lot of different ideas for my business. I don't actually have those ideas. Those ideas exist in the field. And as I align myself and alleviate myself of my limiting beliefs and my traumas, I'm able to tap into more productive information in the field. But all information exists in the field. And so when we are holding on to our trauma and sort of beating the drum of that vibration and those thoughts and those emotions, we activate information in the field that then is received by people who are a frequency match for that information. In other words, someone who also holds that trauma receives that information or those ideas and then brings that trauma alive for everyone to experience based on their actions. So an example that I've given in a previous episode was a conversation that I was having with my mother-in-law and my wife. And in that conversation, I discovered that my mother-in-law had a fear of not being able to pay her rent or pay her mortgage or have a roof over her head. And I realized, wow, this is a very, very common fear. Even working with entrepreneurs and high performers, working with people of all walks of life, many of us are living in some form of what feels like financial insecurity. And the first place we go is like, can I pay my rent? Can I pay my mortgage? And what if I can't? And maybe you've experienced this, like concern that you don't have enough bank account at the end of the month. And the fear, this like collective fear that we all have of like, we're going to end up living under a bridge, right? We're all living under a bridge together. And this is a very primal, sort of existential, ancient fear that we won't have our basic needs met. This goes back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're talking about food, shelter, water. It's built into the defensive nature of the nervous system. So we have a fear that we're not going to have a place to live, just like we have a fear that we're not going to be accepted by others and will be ostracized from the tribe. It's a fight or flight, surviving death type of fear. Well, what happens when enough people haven't realized that life is abundant, life is prosperous, that regardless of the experiences that we've had that may have simulated financial insecurity, the only reason we experience financial insecurity is because we had a lack mindset and belief system that we adopted from our parents. Unless you've transformed that, which most people haven't, which is why most of the world is living in financial insecurity, that means that vibration of being afraid that you're not going to be able to pay your mortgage is being held in the nervous system of millions, if not billions of people. Hey, it's David. Quick interruption to your regularly scheduled podcast episode. I want to let you know about an opportunity to go even deeper into this work together. If you have not yet, please check out the show notes. In there, we've got links to both our Mind Hack and our Whole Human Framework programs. Our Mind Hack course is an incredible framework. It's the foundation of everything that I teach on this show to help you understand how to become deeply aware of the subconscious programs that are holding you back and to teach you the technologies and frameworks to allow you to dramatically transform those belief systems and rewire your brain. Again, the Mind Hack program is our 7-day self-paced program. We also have our 12-week course, The Whole Human Framework. And we've got both of them right now bundled in a special offer for those of you who want to go big, want to go fast, and who understand that you don't want to put off another day of your full potential or holding on to unnecessary stress, anxiety, or suffering, but you want to be liberated from these habits of thinking and have a powerful living experience. Check out the link in the show notes. Jump on over to the website. Take a look at the programs and the extraordinary success stories of entrepreneurs just like you who have gone through these courses, and I will see you on the other side. And now, back to your regularly scheduled podcast episode. So, as a result of that, an idea becomes activated because we're all kind of broadcasting this frequency of financial insecurity. An idea becomes activated in the field that has all information that someone, in this case, in the example I'm using at BlackRock, one of the big private equity firms, receives. And they walk into a board meeting and say, hey, I have this idea of how we can leverage the tremendous amount of capital that we control and dominate markets, which is part of their corporate objective. We could buy up all of residential housing and control the housing market. And then we find out that's exactly a couple of years ago, and probably still today, what they're doing. So we're creating our own reality. We're creating our reality on an individual level, and we're creating our reality on a collective level. And this is very important to understand because a lot of times we point the finger at the problem in our life and we blame others for it rather than realizing we're actually responsible for it. And responsibility is a really important thing. I look at it as an ability to respond. That's what a responsibility is. If you don't have responsibility and you're blaming others, you have no capacity to change your circumstance or situation. And so when we realize we're creating our own reality, not just in our own individual life, but those things out there that you can point to, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, whether it's the Ukraine war or the conflict in Gaza, whether it's censorship or totalitarian control, whether it's wokeism or a lack of insensitivity to things, whether it's pro-life or pro-choice, that whatever you're pointing your finger at out there and you're blaming others and accusing others, you'd be well served by actually looking inside of yourself to see how you're contributing to and creating it. I've witnessed that 100% of the time we blame something else, we're actually perpetuating the same type of activity on others. That we're pointing at a trauma that actually still lives within inside of ourselves. And if you want to change your reality, you have to identify where it is inside of you and use the tools and do the work to actually alleviate yourself of that program or that fear. Again, Gandhi's be the change you want to see in the world. And, some people would say, but Dave, there are real problems out there. Like, this is a very kind of Pollyanna attitude, like to take ultimate responsibility for the fact that in those things that I detest, I find myself. Don't we need to actually address the problems? And I would say, no, you don't. The goal is to become aware of these things, notice what's inside of you that might be contributing to you creating it in your life, where there's some long-held unconscious belief system or unprocessed trauma, do the work to alleviate yourself of it, and you will be protected and taken care of, no matter what the circumstance or situation is. I remember back in 2003, I was running a venture-backed technology company that I had founded, and I hired a bunch of young kids in their early 20s who were explaining to me that the world is run by a handful of people and that the financial system is rigged and that I needed to go buy gold and start prepping for sort of the end of the world. And I had a lot of friends even into 2015, 2016, 2018, 2020, even now, who are prepping, right? They're intentionally preparing to avoid some type of systemic collapse or hyperinflation where you're going to find neighbor against neighbor and, people competing for toilet paper. Now, that may actually be the case, but my approach to addressing that possibility is to actually ignore the possibility altogether. And to look at my fears, my fear of not being as far along as I should be, my fear of not having enough resources, my fear of harm coming to me and not believing in a relationship with my higher power that I will be taken care of and that I can trust and that I'm being asked to enjoy my life. That, as the great metaphysical teacher Jesus said, that the way is easy, my yoke is easy. And so I did the work around it, because for a while I had a closet full of rice that went old and canned tuna and a handful of gold coins and some silver and a duffel bag underneath my AR-15 and a bunch of ammunition that I didn't even know how to use. I remember when I first started dating my wife, she opened the closet. She's like, wow, what is this? Are you ex-paramilitary? I'm like, no, I'm concerned that the system may collapse. And so I decided, and it was really consuming me for a long time, that I was going to deal with the fear. I wasn't going to deal with the situation. And so over the course of time, I got clear on the type of dream home that I wanted. My wife and I decided at one point that we wanted to live in nature. We were at an event in Mexico. I was like, it'd be amazing to live, in Mexico. And we started mapping out our dream home. And then that took us to Puerto Rico, where we live now. And through a series of really uncanny circumstances and situations, we found this, hacienda on top of a mountain, which is my dream home. And now we're on 3 acres and we have chickens and we have eggs, and I order my meat and I store it for 6 months in my refrigerator from a place that does kind of small batch regenerative farms all across North America. And I've got a vegetable garden with all the vegetables I could possibly need to eat growing right in my backyard, and we're completely off grid. And I realized wow, if there were a problem that occurred in the United States, I'm good. But I'm good not because I was trying to solve the problem and be a prepper. I'm good because I dealt with my trauma, and that's leading me into a life of my full potential. And through the process, I built faith and a relationship with my higher power, and now I live in a place where I look like a prepper, but I'm not. So again, what's the point? The point is we can incubate ourselves from any harm in our own lives or any harm in our own world by actually alleviating ourselves of our traumas and our fears, even the fear of being harmed. But we do create our own reality, and we are collectively creating a reality together. There are planes that go down, and every time a plane goes down, there are some people who are on the plane that were scheduled to be on the plane, some people who were supposed to be on the plane but didn't get on the plane for whatever reason, some people who were not supposed to be on the plane but then got on the plane. And I'm not saying you blame anyone, but I'm using this as an example to understand the dynamic. That through the power of our subconscious mind and coincidence and synchronicity, we're always in the right place in exactly the right time according to our belief systems and the amount of trauma and fear that we hold, in addition to what I would call God's will for us. And, when our time is up, our time is up. Is to understand the dynamic machine that's at work here and the tangled web that is behind the scenes of karma and belief systems that are playing out in a robust dynamic, and to understand that we can influence that dynamic. How do we do that? We let go of the fear and we transform the trauma. And so right now we're in this world of like a war on everything. Even with this alternative media that I tend to source for the information that I'm looking for rather than traditional media, there's this propensity to become inflamed and angry at the other side. And I think if you go back to Christian principles, not that I'm suggesting Christianity for everybody, but looking at the teachings of Jesus as an explanation of how these laws function, right? He said, when you find an enemy, you give them the other cheek. You don't resist them. And we're in a resistance culture right now. And if you truly want to be able to navigate through your own individual life with grace and with prosperity and with abundance and with joy, and you want to navigate through this collective reality that we are co-creating together, this mixing together of all of these soups of belief systems and how they're manifesting and materializing into our reality, the key is non-resistance, right? The key is to allow the fear and the trauma to go. Now, how do you do that? That's what this channel is about. That's what this show is about. We have 100 episodes on a variety of perspectives and tools that you can use to do the deep work in order to create this transformation and be the change that you want to see in the world. But if you want to experience a peaceful world, the question is, are you living as a peaceful person? If not, then that's something for you to look at, right? If you're an angry person, you're going to notice and align with anger in the world, and your world will become angry and your life will become angry. If you're scared, then you'll interface and create a fear-based reality. But if you trust, you'll experience safety and feel safe. And so the root cause work for us to do is not to actually change anything in our external reality. If we want to change, it's to look inside of us. It's to look at the reaction that we're having to our external reality. Notice the reaction, the thoughts that you're having. And those are your belief systems. And as you work with your belief systems, as you change your inner climate, you begin to restructure your outer architecture. And this is how you actually change your reality. So I hope you love this as much as I love sharing it with you. Again, we have so many episodes to help you with this. You could literally click on a random episode and you're going to get some teaching and tools in order to actually identify and transform that which is inside of you that is creating an external reality that you don't prefer. And if you love this episode or you have any questions, do me a couple of favors. If you're following on YouTube, comment. Let me know what you think. Like, let's poke holes in this. Come up with some examples that you think that this philosophy doesn't hold up against. And I try to answer as many questions as I can. But let me know what you think. We're in this journey together. And subscribe and make sure you hit that bell icon. That's the way you'll get notifications of upcoming episodes. And if you're listening on the audio platforms, do me a favor. You can also subscribe and leave me a rating and review. I love getting rating and reviews and hearing your feedback on how this show is impacting you. Again, this is a journey. This is a do-it-together experience. This is not a do-it-on-your-own. And also, if you love this episode and you feel like there's someone in your life who needs to hear it, just forward it. Share the link with somebody. Hey, check this out. This made a lot of sense. This has really been in alignment with what we're talking about. This might uplift your spirits, because the point is, you can change any circumstance or situation that you're in, no matter how localized it is or how global it is. You are the change that we all want to see in the world, and I'm just grateful to be on this journey with you. I love you so much, and I will see you on the next episode. Hey, it's David. Hop on over to davidbear.com. Click right here. There's also a link in the show notes, and sign up for our newsletter. You'll get immediate access to my free Mind Hack ebook, as well as a couple of trainings to help you master the inner game. This is a great way to stay informed and be a part of our community and be notified of special announcements. Click below, head on over to the website, get subscribed. If you loved this video, make sure you check out this one or this one, and I will see you in the next video.